I'd like to go over some things that I look for in upright sprinting mechanics. So this is a video that I shot from the first row of the 2024 U.S. Olympic trials. I had a first row seat since I was coaching triple jump at the time. This is heat one. Noah Lyles is in white in the lead, and he ran 9:92 in this heat. You can see Kenny Bednarek with his trademark headband here in lane 4. And we also get a good view of Kyrie King in purple here in lane 7. So Noah's left foot is just about to leave the track here, and some of the things we see. His left knee is bent slightly. It's not extended completely. You hear people talk about triple extension of the hip, knee, and ankle. That doesn't happen in elite sprinting. It isn't very efficient to extend the knee joint and delay the ground time, and it also slows the foot recovery to the front. You'll always see a slight bend in the knee at this moment as in elite sprinters who are executing well. You see his ankle is bent about 90 degrees. It's leaving the ground as well. So he's not extending that completely either. He's creating a firm joint in the ankle and his foot to put the forces through. But the majority of the force is coming from the joints above, in his hips especially. So you can see his pelvis is anteriorly tilted slightly in this moment as he's extending his hip, and he'll get it back to neutral in the next step, in the flight before the next step. It's hard to tell from the angle, but his pelvis is also tilted slightly higher in the frontal plane, so his right hip is higher than the left. A front or a back view, you would see his belt line a little higher on the right side. In the sagittal plane, his right hip is more forward than on the left side as well. And in the upper body, we see the left arm and the front arm here is bent less than 90 degrees, and there's a slightly larger angle beyond 90 degrees in the back arm here. So these mirror similar angles to the opposite leg. So we see this leg bent up around a tight angle, and as this kind of mirrors this front arm here, and the back one's a little bigger as the opposite arm is as well. So Noah's shoulder is his left side shoulder is forward in comparison to the right, and that mirrors what is happening with his hips. His front hip and his right side is pushed forward as well. He's leaving the ground here. So you see his head is in neutral alignment, face is very calm. Now let's take this video a little bit further here. You see he's pushing off, and now look at his ankles. He's extending a little bit as he's leaving the ground, and he's just covering his thigh back to the top for the next stride. By the time he's ready to strike the ground on the next step, the ankle will be dorsiflexed and ready here, and you can see this other foot, the ankle is cocked up and ready for this ground contact. So he's flying here, and there's a small vertical component to his run, with the mid stance being the low point right here, and the high point being in flight right about here. I like to use a background line. You can see this part of the stadium here. You can see part of his head where it is. His chin is above that white line, and we come down here, it's significantly lower. So he's bouncing a little bit, and that gives him time to get his pelvis oriented up for the next step. So if you're familiar with Altus kinograms, this here is the strike position. His pelvis is neutral now, and we see his swing leg, his thigh is parallel with the ground right over here. It's a little bit high, closer to his butt. Now, the lowest it could be, you'd see, is maybe like level with the ground on a high level sprinting. It shouldn't be way up high, up here close to his butt. So his lower leg is swung out some, and he's ready to prepare the hamstrings for the impact of the ground. Now watch his left arm extend downward to the ground as his right leg starts working into the ground. So you see the arms are opposing what the legs are doing and giving us some balance here. If we keep our arms at 90 degrees, we'll get a lot of excessive twisting in the torso and in the back. And that's a common error that you see people trying to do. The well-meaning coaches are trying to teach this 90 degrees, keep your arms at 90 degrees kind of idea. Okay, let's move this down now to touchdown. And so as he's coming down to the ground, you see his foot turn out slightly, and then his foot lands on the outside of the foot and pronates in towards the inside of his foot. The heel sinks to the ground as he's passing over it. There's a common misconception here that foot contact should be high on the toes and just stay up there, and be very rigid on the ground contact. Ankle stiffness and foot stiffness are good, but too much without any yielding can cause injuries to the foot and Achilles over time, especially like tendonitis and plantar fascia issues. When you do apply a lot of force in a short time, and there's an ideal ground contact for each person, shorter isn't always better if we aren't able to apply the right forces during the ground contact. Hey, let's advance this video a bit forward here. So now as we're moving through, we're at toe off on this other side. So the right foot is leaving the ground, and again we see this knee is slightly bent. We can see his pelvis is tilted back slightly as he's extending his hip. And from this side, it's easier to see the swing leg hip is in front, as I described earlier, and the shoulder of the opposite arm, the right here, is in front as well. So that kind of twisting going on in the torso. So proper amounts of that twisting of the torso is very good. It loads the abdominal structure for the next step and makes us very elastic as we run. Too much, and it's going to cause problems too. Another thing I want to draw attention to is when Noah strikes the ground here, his shin is pretty much vertical. So that's the moment there. That's a pretty much perpendicular with the ground. And you watch like King over here, again, pretty vertical. He's executing a pretty good run too. Bednarik, the same thing. Now we take it back to Trayvon White-Boston here. You see when he strikes the ground, his shin is almost negative with the ground once he's bearing weight on it. And that's one of the negatives that you don't want to see. Trayvon has a PR of 10:14. He's a pretty good sprinter. This is only a 10:44 performance for him, so he's not at his best. I expected he did a lot better in his 10:14 run, but it's a lot harder to execute when you're running from behind. So some of the key differences between Noah and Trayvon here, you see just a lot of excessive forward lean on Trayvon as he's running. And we see a lot of anterior pelvic tilt that he isn't able to correct between steps here. So that he's not having enough vertical component of his run to reorient his pelvis for the next step. People often get stuck like this when they're behind and they panic and push too horizontally in the transition to becoming upright, and then they never really quite get there, losing a little bit of stride length on every step from then on all the way through the run. At touchdown, there's a lot of gap between the knees in here compared to where Noah and the other guys are pretty much knees together. You see his heel way up high, attached to like close to his butt, and that's not good either. There's a lot of back kick on here that's hurting him. A lot of force leakage compared to the other guys as well. Another thing to point out here is foot is turned out a lot on the ground contacts. So he may need some therapy here. It might also be related to his forward lean posture as well. If you have any questions, you can contact me on my Instagram at GlennSmith996. I'm going to be running some coach mentoring and consulting type programs to help you train your coaching eye to see a lot of these things and help develop in their athletes. So feel free to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to talk with you some of these things and how they'll be working.